The great hall of the Galactic Council fell silent as Ambassador Kethris of the Vallani rose from his seat. His silver skin caught the light of 1,000 distant stars streaming through the observation dome above. Around him sat representatives of 47 spacefaring species, each one watching with careful eyes. "Honored colleagues," Kethris began, his voice carrying the musical quality of his kind. "I have completed my study of the newest species to reach the stars, the ones who call themselves human." A murmur passed through the chamber. The humans had made first contact only 3 years ago, but already their names sparked curiosity and concern in equal measure. They were strange creatures, soft-bodied, short-lived. They possessed no natural armor, no venomous glands, no ability to see beyond the narrow spectrum of visible light. By all measures, they should have been prey on their homeworld, not its dominant species, and yet here they were, building ships and reaching for the cosmos. The first speaker, an ancient being of crystalline form, gestured for Kethris to continue. "Tell us what you have learned, Ambassador." Kethris activated the holographic display at the center of the chamber. An image of Earth appeared, blue and green and wrapped in white clouds. It looked peaceful from this distance. Beautiful, even. "I began my study expecting to find the usual pattern," Kethris said. "A species rises on a stable world, develops technology, reaches space. This is the path we all walked." He paused. The humans did not walk this path. He changed the display. The peaceful Earth disappeared, replaced by a timeline stretching back billions of years. Red markers dotted its length like wounds. Their world has experienced 5 mass extinction events. 5 times, nearly all life on Earth was wiped away. The creatures that survived each catastrophe had to rebuild everything from almost nothing. Kethris let that sink in. Humans evolved in the aftermath of the last great dying. They are children of extinction. The Korthan Delegate, a being of hard shell and sharp angles, leaned forward. "Many worlds experience extinction events. This is not remarkable." "You are correct," Kethris agreed. "What is remarkable is what came after." He pulled up more data. Humans did not evolve on a kind world. They faced ice ages that covered half their planet in frozen death. They faced predators with claws and teeth that could tear them apart. They faced diseases that killed millions. They faced each other in wars that burned cities to ash. The images shifted. Ice sheets advancing. Great cats hunting in tall grass. Plague victims in crowded streets. Mushroom clouds rising over ruined cities. Any one of these challenges would have broken most species, Kethris continued. The humans faced all of them, often at the same time, and they did not break. The chamber had grown very quiet now. I studied their history, expecting to find a species hardened by conflict. A warrior race, perhaps made cruel by suffering. Kethris shook his head slowly. That is not what I found. I found something far more troubling. He displayed a new set of images. Humans rebuilding cities after earthquakes. Humans caring for the sick during plagues. Humans reaching out hands to former enemies after wars. They do not simply endure loss. They transform it. Every tragedy in their history became a lesson they passed down to their children. Every disaster sparked new inventions, new ways of thinking, new determination to survive. They built medicines from plagues. They built peace from wars. They built strength from every single thing that tried to destroy them. The first speaker's crystalline form pulsed with thought. You speak as if they are dangerous. I speak as if they are unlike anything we have encountered, Kethris replied. Consider this. The Vallani evolved on a world of endless summer and gentle rains. We have known 10,000 years of peace because we never needed to know war. The Korthan developed on a world of plenty, where cooperation was logical because resources were never scarce. We are all, in our own ways, children of gentle worlds. He turned back to the image of Earth. The humans are not. They are children of a world that tried to kill them at every turn. And they won. Not once, not twice. Over and over again, for millions of years, they faced extinction and chose to survive instead. This is written into their very souls. They do not know how to give up. They do not understand surrender. When they fall, they get back up. When they lose, they learn. When they grieve, they grow stronger. Cathris deactivated the display. The chamber returned to starlight. I have read their literature. I have studied their songs. They have a word that appears again and again in their stories: hope. They define it as belief in a better future, even when all evidence suggests none exists. They consider this a virtue. He paused. We would consider it madness. But for a species built from loss, it is the only sane response. The first speaker rose, light refracting through its ancient form. You have given us much to consider, Ambassador, but I sense you have not yet spoken your true concern. Cathris was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. Honored colleagues, I have one question that I cannot answer. One question that keeps me awake in the dark hours of the night. He looked around the chamber at the faces of 47 species, each one shaped by their own gentle history. The humans became what they are because loss forged them. Tragedy made them strong. Grief gave them purpose. He took a breath. What happens when a species built from loss has nothing left to lose? No one had an answer. The stars continued their slow wheel overhead, indifferent to the small beings below who had just begun to understand what humanity truly was. And somewhere, on a small blue world orbiting an ordinary yellow star, 8 billion humans went about their lives, carrying the weight of all their ancestors' sorrows and triumphs, not knowing that the galaxy had finally noticed them and was afraid. 6 months after, Ambassador Cathris delivered his report. The Dominion of Reth proved his fears well-founded. Mirren Station hung in the space between 3 trade routes. A neutral port where species from across the galaxy could meet and do business. 12,000 souls called it home. Among them were 32 humans, mostly engineers and security personnel who had taken contracts far from Earth. When the Dominion fleet appeared without warning, surrounding the station with enough firepower to crack a moon, the other species knew what came next. The Vreth had conquered 40 worlds using the same method. Overwhelming force, followed by surrender, followed by absorption into their empire. It was efficient. It was inevitable. The station's administrator, a Vellani named Soreth, opened communications with the Vreth commander immediately. We acknowledge your superior position, he said, his voice steady despite his fear. We will begin surrender protocols and await your terms. The Vreth commander's image filled the screen. She was tall and armored, her face marked with the ritual scars of her warrior caste. Wise choice. Prepare your people for processing. Resistance will result in death. The transmission ended. Soreth turned to address the gathered representatives of each species aboard the station. Korthan merchants, Vellani diplomats, traders and travelers from a dozen worlds. They all understood. Surrender was logical. Surrender meant survival. Then a human voice spoke from the back of the room. No. Commander Diane Okafor stepped forward. She was not a large woman. She had no claws, no armor, no bioluminescent threat displays. She was simply a human being in a worn uniform, with tired eyes and calloused hands. We are not surrendering, she said. Soreth stared at her. Commander, you cannot be serious. There are 14 warships out there. We have no weapons capable of. I know what we don't have. Okafor cut him off, her voice calm. I also know what we do have. 3 fusion reactors. maintenance equipment that can be converted into cutting tools, 40 kilometers of corridors with blast doors every 100 meters, and 32 humans who have no intention of being processed. A Corthan merchant stepped forward, his shell clicking with agitation. This is madness. The odds of successful resistance are... I don't care about the odds. Okafor met his eyes without flinching. My grandmother survived a genocide. Soldiers came to her village and killed everyone she loved. She was 7 years old, and she walked 200 kilometers through a war zone to reach safety. My father rebuilt a city after an earthquake with his bare hands, brick by brick, for 11 years. She smiled, but there was no humor in it. You think odds scare us? You think numbers on a screen mean anything to people like me? She turned to address the whole room. Anyone who wants to surrender can gather in the main hangar. The Vreth will take you. I won't stop you. But my people are going to fight. And anyone who wants to stand with us is welcome. She walked out without waiting for a response. The Vreth boarding parties entered, Mirren Station expecting terrified civilians and quick compliance. They found neither. The first squad walked into a corridor that had been vented to vacuum, their sealed armor protecting them, but their formations scattered by the explosive decompression. Human security officers hit them from 3 directions at once, using maintenance tools, modified into makeshift weapons. The second squad found their path blocked by blast doors welded shut. When they cut through, the floor gave way beneath them, dropping them into a cargo hold filled with industrial coolant that flash froze their armor joints solid. The third squad never reported back at all. Day after day, the humans fought. They used every trick they had learned from a million years of desperate survival. They set traps. They staged ambush. They fell back and regrouped and attacked again. They did not sleep. They barely ate. They lost people, and they mourned quickly, and they kept fighting. On day 4, a Vallani doctor named Kira found herself working alongside the humans, treating wounds in a makeshift medical bay. She asked one of them, a young engineer named Marcus, who had lost 2 fingers to a plasma burn, why they did not simply surrender. Marcus looked at her with exhausted eyes. Do you know what my great-grandmother did during a war on Earth? She hid children in her basement. 37 children for 2 years while soldiers hunted them. She was shot twice, and she kept going. When the war ended, all 37 children were still alive. He flexed his remaining fingers. I come from people like that. Giving up isn't in my blood. It was burned out of us a long time ago. On day 9, the Vreth had taken barely a quarter of the station. Their losses were mounting. Their commander was furious, unable to understand why this small group of soft-bodied creatures refused to accept the inevitable. That night, the station's internal sensors picked up something strange. Sound, coming from the human-held sections. The Vreth commander listened to the recording with growing confusion. The humans were singing. Dozens of voices raced together in songs she did not recognize. Some were fierce and rhythmic like war chants. Others were soft and sad, like lullabies. All of them carried a power that made her scales prickle with unease. What are they doing? She demanded. Her tactical officer had no answer. Unknown, Commander. Perhaps a religious ritual before death. But the humans did not die. They sang, and then they fought harder than ever. On day 11, when the Council Relief Fleet finally arrived and the Vreth were forced to withdraw, only 13 humans remained alive. 19 had fallen defending a station that was not even their home, protecting people who were not even their species. Ambassador Kethris watched the footage from his quarters on the Council. Homeworld. He saw the humans carrying their dead with gentle hands. He saw them weeping without shame. He saw Commander Okafor wounded in 3 places, refusing medical treatment until every other survivor had been helped first. And he understood, finally, What he had tried to explain to the council 6 months ago, the humans did not fight because they thought they could win. They fought because surrender was simply not something they knew how to do. 10,000 generations of loss had burned that option out of their species entirely. They carried their ancestors with them always. And those ancestors whispered in their blood, "Survive, endure, never give up." The Vreth had conquered 40 worlds because every species eventually calculated that resistance was futile. The humans did not calculate. They remembered. And memory, Catharus realized, was stronger than mathematics. He began writing his request for permission to visit Earth. He needed to see for himself the world that had forged such impossible people. Ambassador Catharus had seen many worlds. Paradise planets covered in endless flowers. Ice giants with aurora storms that danced for centuries. Binary systems where 2 suns painted the sky in colors his language had no words for. None of them prepared him for Earth. The shuttle descended through clouds heavy with rain. And Catharus pressed his silver face against the window like a child. Below him, the land was a patchwork of green and brown and gray. Cities sprawled across river valleys. Roads cut through forests. And everywhere, there were signs of rebuilding. New structures rising next to old ruins. Fresh growth pushing through scarred earth. His guide was waiting at the landing site. Dr. Samuel. HFY was a tall man with kind eyes and gray in his hair. He shook Catharus's hand in the human fashion and smiled warmly. "Welcome to Earth, Ambassador. I understand you want to see what made us who we are." Catharus nodded. "After Mirren Station, the Council needs to understand." "I need to understand." "Then let me show you our scars," HFY said. "That's where the truth lives." They traveled first to a city called Hiroshima. Catharus knew the history from his studies. 80 years ago, humans had dropped a weapon of terrible power on this place. In a single flash, 100,000 people had died. The city had been erased, but when Catharus walked through the streets, he found no trace of that destruction. The city had been rebuilt entirely. Trees lined the boulevards. Children played in parks. Life filled every corner. Then HFY brought him to the memorial. It was a simple structure, a dome of twisted metal that had survived the blast. Around it, thousands of paper cranes hung on strings, each one folded by human hands. Catharus watched families walking through the site. Old people who wept quietly. Young people who read the names carved in stone with serious eyes. "We do not forget," HFY said softly. "We build our cities again, but we keep the memory alive. The children you see here, they come on school trips. They learn what happened. They learn why it must never happen again." Catharus was quiet for a long moment. "On my world, we would hide such a place. We would be ashamed of such violence." "We are ashamed," HFY agreed. "But shame hidden is shame repeated. We show our children the worst of what we are capable of, so they can choose to be better." They traveled next to a place in Europe where millions had been killed simply for who they were. The camps had been preserved as museums now, their fences and buildings standing as silent witnesses to horror. Catharus walked through rooms filled with photographs of the dead. So many faces, so many lives ended, and again, there were children. Teachers leading groups of young humans through the exhibits, explaining in gentle voices what had happened here. The children listened with wide eyes. Some of them cried. None of them looked away. "Why do you do this?" Catharus asked. "Why show them such pain?" HFY stood beside a wall covered in names. "Because the dead cannot speak for themselves. So we speak for them. We carry their stories so that they are never truly gone." He touched one of the names gently. "My great-grandfather's sister died in a place like this. I never met her, but I know her name. I know her face. I tell her story to my own children, and they will tell it to theirs. As long as we remember, she lives on. They traveled to other places. Cities that had drowned when the seas rose, now rebuilt on higher ground with underwater markers showing where the old streets had been. Battlefields where millions had died in wars fought over flags and borders, now covered in grass and flowers and monuments to the fallen. Hospitals built on the sites of plague outbreaks, dedicated to ensuring such diseases would never spread unchecked again. At each place, Catharus found the same pattern: destruction followed by memory, followed by rebuilding. The humans did not try to escape their past. They carried it with them, like a weight that somehow made them stronger instead of crushing them. On the final day of his visit, HFY brought Catharus to a quiet hill overlooking a valley. A small cemetery spread across the slope, simple stones marking the graves of generations. "This is where my family is buried," HFY said. "My parents. My grandparents. Going back 300 years. He sat down on the grass, and after a moment, Catharus sat beside him. "I come here when I need to remember why I keep going," HFY continued. "All of these people faced their own hardships, wars, famines, diseases, injustice. They could have given up. Many times, it would have been easier to give up. But they didn't. They survived long enough to raise children, who survived long enough to raise children, and so on until eventually there was me." He looked at Catharus with those kind, tired eyes. "Do you understand now, Ambassador? We don't fight despite our losses. We fight because of them. Every human carries the dead with them. Our ancestors are in our blood, in our stories, in the very shape of our souls. When we face impossible odds, we hear their voices telling us to keep going. We refuse to let them have died for nothing." Catharus thought of the humans on Mirren Station. 13 survivors singing songs in the dark, surrounded by enemies, refusing to surrender. He understood now where that strength came from. "The Vallani believe that peace comes from forgetting pain," he said slowly. "We think memory is a burden." HFY shook his head. "For us, memory is a gift. A heavy gift, yes. But when you carry the weight of everyone who came before you, you find that you can carry almost anything." He stood up and offered Catharus his hand. "The galaxy thinks we are strong because we don't break. The truth is simpler than that. We are strong because we have broken over and over again, and we have learned how to put ourselves back together." Catharus took his hand and rose. The sun was setting over the valley, painting the sky in shades of gold and red. Somewhere in the distance, a bird was singing. "What happens now?" Catharus asked. "The Dominion will not forget Mirren Station. They will come for humanity eventually." HFY's expression did not change, but something hardened in his eyes. "Then we will do what we have always done. We will grieve our dead. We will remember their names. And we will keep fighting until there is nothing left of us, or nothing left of them." He smiled then, gentle and sad and fierce all at once. "We are built from loss, Ambassador, and loss has made us unbreakable." The Dominion of Wrath came for humanity on a Tuesday. Their fleet was vast beyond counting. 1,000 warships descended on human space, their commanders confident that this time would be different. Mirren Station had been a surprise, nothing more. A trick that would not work twice. The Wrath had conquered 40 worlds, and they would conquer this one too. In the opening hours of the invasion, 3 human colony worlds burned. New Guangzhou, Esperanza, Port Darwin. Orbital bombardment turned cities to glass and fields to ash. 14 million people died before the sun set on those worlds for the last time. The galaxy watched and waited for humanity to sue for peace. This was the pattern. This was how it always went. The Dominion struck hard, and their enemies calculated the cost of continued resistance, and they surrendered. It was logical. It was inevitable. Earth went silent. For 3 days, no transmissions came from human space. The Dominion fleet paused its advance, waiting for the white flag they were certain would come. Ambassador Kethris sat in his quarters on the Council homeworld, staring at a blank screen, his silver hands trembling. On the fourth day, humanity spoke. Every human ship, every station, every colony, every transmitter on Earth itself. They all broadcast the same thing, a signal so powerful it drowned out all other communications across the sector. It was a list of names. 14 million names. Read aloud in voices that shook with grief but did not break. Human voices, one after another, speaking the names of the dead. Old voices and young voices. Voices thick with tears. Voices steady with purpose. The recitation took 18 hours. The galaxy listened in confusion and growing unease. When the last name was spoken, there was silence. One heartbeat. Two. Then a single voice, clear and strong, spoke words that would echo through history. We remember you. We will always remember you. And we will not stop until this can never happen again. The human counteroffensive began an hour later. Ships poured out of human space in numbers the Dominion had not expected. Many of them were civilian vessels, retrofitted with weapons and crewed by volunteers. The Vreth commanders noted with confusion that these ships bore the names of the fallen colonies. New Guangzhou's Vengeance, Esperanza's Promise, Port Darwin's Children. The humans did not fight like any enemy the Dominion had faced before. They did not calculate acceptable losses. They did not retreat when the odds turned against them. They pushed forward with a ferocity that bordered on madness. Their ships flying into certain death with names of the dead painted on their hulls. A Vreth commander, watching his fleet fragment before the human assault, demanded an explanation from his tactical officer. Why do they not fear death? Why do they not stop? His officer had no answer. The Vreth had evolved on a world of plenty, where life was easy and death was something to be avoided at all costs. They could not understand a species that treated death as a companion rather than an enemy. They could not comprehend soldiers who whispered the names of fallen friends before every battle, drawing strength from grief rather than weakness. The war lasted 2 years. The humans lost millions more. They mourned every single one. And they kept fighting. When the human fleet finally reached the Vreth homeworld, the Dominion's leadership expected destruction. They had seen what humanity did to those who attacked them. They prepared for the end. Instead, the human envoy who stood before the defeated Vreth Council was calm. Her name was Elena Okafor, daughter of the commander who had held Mirren Station. She had lost her mother in that battle. She had lost her father when Port Darwin burned. She had lost friends in every engagement of the war. She looked at the beings who had taken everything from her. And she did not reach for a weapon. She reached out her hand. "We know what it is to lose everything," she said, her voice steady. "We have known it since before we knew how to write. Loss is in our bones. It made us who we are." She paused. "We could destroy you. We have the power, and many of my people want exactly that. But we have learned something in our long history of suffering. Revenge does not heal wounds. It only creates new ones." The Vreth Council stared at her in disbelief. "We are offering you a choice," Elena continued. "You can rebuild. You can change. You can become something better than what you were. Or you can fight us until nothing remains of either of our peoples." She smiled, sad and tired and somehow still full of hope. "We would rather help you grow than watch you burn. We have buried too many already. Even enemies." The Vreth chose to live. Years later, Ambassador Kethris stood before a classroom of young diplomats from a dozen species. His silver skin had dulled with age, but his eyes were still sharp. Behind him, a holographic display showed images of humans and Vreth working together to rebuild what the war had destroyed. "I have studied humanity for most of my adult life," he told the class. I have seen them at their worst and at their best. I have watched them suffer losses that would have broken any other species. And I have watched them rise again and again from the ashes of their grief. They changed the display to show Earth, still blue and green and wrapped in clouds, still beautiful despite all the scars it bore. Do not mistake human kindness for weakness, he warned. They are kind because they have known cruelty. They offer mercy because they know what it costs to have none. They forgive because they understand, better than any species in the galaxy, the true price of endless vengeance. He paused, letting his words sink in. But never, ever threaten what they love, because humans fight hardest when they have something to protect. They have buried too many to ever stop fighting for those who remain. Their strength does not come from anger or hatred. It comes from love so deep that even death cannot diminish it. The young diplomats were silent, absorbing his words. The galaxy asked me once what happens when a species built from loss has nothing left to lose, Cathris concluded. I have learned the answer. They never truly have nothing left to lose, because they carry their dead with them always. Every human who has ever lived is still present in every human who lives now. Their ancestors are their armor. Their grief is their fuel. Their memory is their immortality. He shut down the display and looked at his students with ancient, knowing eyes. Humans are not strong despite being broken. They are strong because they were broken over and over again, and they chose to rebuild every single time. They are built from loss, and that is why, in the end, they are unbreakable. Outside the window, stars wheeled slowly through the void. Somewhere among them, on 1,000 worlds now linked in peace, humans continued to do what they had always done. They loved. They lost. They remembered Dot, and they endured.